then, of course, you have grace, and grace is, I have broken these laws, and the lawgiver has freely forgiven me. All right, Romans 3 and verse 20. Therefore, by the deeds of the law shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. So why can't we be made right by the law? Justified, made right by keeping the law? Well, let's say, okay, let me give you another little story here. Let's say we get really serious about keeping God's law. Let's say I finally figure out that the law is for my own good, that the law that says don't commit adultery is really for my own good, okay? You know, a lot of people think, well, why didn't God just say commit adultery? No, he said don't commit adultery. Okay. Now, you know, there are, for a better term, bugs that can be transmitted back and forth between husband and wife when they have sexual relationship, and nothing happens. You know, it's just, you know, passing back and forth from each other, from one another. But when you introduce multiple partners, and this person, this strange flesh, and that strange flesh, these bugs mutate, divide and conquer, and that's where STDs come from. Okay, so did God know what he was talking about when he said, hey, people, don't commit adultery, stay faithful to your wife, stay faithful to your husband? Did he know what he was talking about? He gave us that for our own good, you see. And this is where, you know, appreciation for the lawgiver, respect for the lawgiver, because God has given me this law. He's given me this law that is really for my own good and my own well-being, you see. Now, let's say I say, okay, God, I'm keeping your law. I'm saying this to God, and I am right in your eyes. I should be justified in your eyes, made right. Okay. And God comes along and says, no, wait a minute. Okay, you're doing a pretty good job at keeping my law, but what about all those commandments before? What about all those sins you committed before? What about all those commandments you broke before? What about all those sins before you got serious about really keeping my law? What about all those? You see, this is why the law can't make you right, because your past has to be forgiven. In fact, the Bible says this in Romans 3 and verse 25, whom God has set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past. Did you know that? Okay. Remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of God. In other words, just because I start keeping the law today does nothing about my law breaking in the past, you see. And this is where grace comes in. And you know, grace, even after we get serious about keeping God's law, we still fall flat on our face from time to time. And this is where grace comes in. Undeserved pardon. You don't deserve it, but I'm going to forgive you anyway.
Check us out on the web at isthatreallyinthebible.com.